you why exactly this particular lab is necessary for all of us. So apart from that, actually, I have just started giving you introduction uh, the various tests that we are going to perform under this particular laboratory session. So in that, we have broadly classified the complete test into, initially based on the grain character as well as the matrix character. So the grain character was basically an individual grain. If you take what are the properties that you can derive out of it, for example, the specific gravity, the surface area character, the morphology, mineralogy. So all these attributes are corresponding to a grain. Whereas when we think about the matrix property, so the matrix property is basically, a mass of soil. How exactly it is going to behave, or how exactly properties are going to be measured. So in that we discussed on, the density. Density is basically the mass by volume. The mass term itself take into account of, a combination or a, bulk amount of material which are taken together inside a constant volume system. Thereby, we used to mention the term called as density. The porosity, again, the porosity term is also a matrix property. Density is a metric property. Apart from that, the void ratio, again, that is a matrix property. And I'm sure that to the grain property. Hello. Hello, am I audible to you? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So in the volume mass relationship, we could correlate the volumetric ratios. So for example, the void ratio to that of the mass relationships, like, the water content, the degree of saturation, and the specific gravity. ES is equal to GW relationship. So truly speaking, it is one of the volumetric volume mass relationship wherein the matrix property as well as the grain property is being taken into account. So to just go through it at a glance, on the other day I have told you we had the index property. So we were using the index property to name a soil. We are interested in naming a soil. So that's the first step. Whenever we are going to the field, we have to name a soil. We cannot call it as brown soil, black soil, orange soil, red soil, etc. We always have to name it according to IS classification or else USCS, Unified Soil Classification System. So we have to follow one of the nomenclature, or we have to follow one of the taxonomy in naming the soil. So for that we were using the index property. So to go into the details, as I have told you, so to name a soil, the first test that we normally carry out is basically the grain size distribution. So in grain size distribution itself, we are having two different tests. One is basically the sieve analysis. The other test is basically the hydrometer analysis. So the sieve analysis, as I have told you, it is already discussed. It's meant for coarse grain soil. So the coarse grain soils are the soils wherein majority above 50% of the fraction is greater than 75 micron size. So they are called as coarse grain soil. Whereas fine grain soils are the soils in which majority, which is greater than 50%, majority of the soil is greater than a size which is lesser than 75 micron. So that is called as a fine grain soil. So in order to classify a coarse grain soil, we go for the test which is called as sieve analysis. Now going into details of sieve analysis. So anyway, I'll be taking one of the session. Today I'm just giving you a glimpse of how exactly we proceed with it. So in order to do a sieve analysis, we are having sieves of different size, starting from 4.75, 2.36, 1.18, and so on. It goes up to 75 micron. And at the base, we are having a pan. So we will take almost close to half a kg to 1 kg of soil, dry soil. We will keep in the topmost pan. We will shake it. We will shake it at least not less than 20 to 25 minutes. So what will happen is, through the space to the aperture size of the sieve, the particles will keep on coming down, and it will get retained in any of the sieve corresponding to its individual grain. So based on that, we can measure the mass which is retained in each of the sieve, and based on that we can plot something which is called as the grain size distribution curve. So this grain size distribution curve is a curve which is plotted corresponding to the percentage passing as well as the sieve size. Now, as you can see, this particular graph is plotted on a semi-logarithmic sheet. On the x-axis, what you see is basically a semi-logarithmic sheet in which you can see the variation is from 0.001, 0.01, 0.1. In the logarithmic scale, it is varying. Now, based on the percentage passing, we can get an idea of the type of soil. Say, for example, if it is well graded or it is poorly graded, whether it is well graded gravel or poorly graded gravel, or whether it is a well graded sand or a poorly graded sand. So these are the major classification that we come across when we are going for the grain size distribution analysis. So finally, the outcome of a sieve analysis is that you can classify a coarse grain soil based on sieve analysis. After that, we can plot this graph. From this graph, easily we can take out the parameters of Cu and Cc, which are basically the uniformity coefficient and coefficient of curvature. I'm sure that actually you must have come across these terms based on the D30, D10 and D60. D30 square by D10, D60 is basically the uniformity coefficient, and D60 square, D60 by D10 is uniformity coefficient, and D30 square by D10, D60 will give you the coefficient of curvature. So based on these values, you can classify a coarse grain soil. So this is the ultimate aim of doing a sieve analysis. So a sieve analysis will give you the naming for a coarse grain soil. Now coming to the hydrometer analysis. So the hydrometer analysis that you see is basically a test in which we are using the Stokes law. So this is what is called as a hydrometer. As you can see, the first image that you see is basically a soil hydrometer. So truly speaking, here we are taking into account of the Stokes law. So which means what we do is we will take approximately 50 gram of the soil. So I'll give you a complete detail of how this test is being done in the coming classes, but I'm just giving you an intro to this particular test. So what we do is we will take 50 grams of soil. We will take, a jar inside which you will take almost 1,000 liter of water, 1,000 ml of water, 1 liter of water, to which you will be adding 50 grams of soil. You will mix it thoroughly, and we will wait for its settlement of this particle. So these particles will settle based on its specific gravity. So while these particles are trying to settle, the Stokes law can be applied. Whenever a solid particle is trying to move through a fluid, it will attain the velocity which is called as terminal velocity. So when it achieves the terminal velocity, it will be moving at a constant velocity. So based on that, the Stokes law is being applied on this particular hydrometer analysis in order to get the particle. So corresponding to 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, we'll be keeping on measuring the hydrometer readings. So based on that, we will be able to tell how much is the fraction of size which belongs to 75 to 60 micron, 60 to 30 micron, 30 to 20 micron, and so on. Even for lesser than 2 micron also, based on the hydrometer reading, you will be able to estimate the particle size. So this is how actually you can apply the Stokes law. So the Stokes law, which is actually meant for a particle that achieves terminal velocity. So the same principle is being applied in hydrometer for its analysis. Now similarly, so this hydrometer analysis is not sufficient for classifying a fine grained soil. So we have to also do the consistency limit. So the consistency limit is nothing other than the plasticity characteristics. Through a sieve analysis, you could classify coarse grain soil, whereas just with hydrometer analysis alone, you cannot classify a fine grain soil. You have to get the values of liquid limit as well as the plastic limit. So I will just give you refresh the portion which you must have already learned in your last semester, how this test is going to be. I'm just speaking about the theory part. So all the soil that you come across, or all the fine grained soil that you come across, apart from its size, it have its plasticity character. So in order to define its plasticity character, we need to know the limits which are called as the plastic limit, the liquid limit, as well as the shrinkage limit. So this is a curve, whatever you are seeing in front of you is nothing other than how a soil behave based on the amount of water which is present inside its pore space. So for example, you are taking a clay in your hand, dry clay in your hand. Now what you are doing is actually you are going to mix it with water. Now you add sufficient water in such a way that actually you are making a slurry out of it. So what is the property of a slurry? A property of a slurry is more or less similar to that of a viscous fluid. The moment you take a slurry, you can, take it in two different classes and you can pour it. Because as the water content is extremely higher, it exhibits more or less of a property of a fluid as compared to that of a solid. So which means we are forcing that particular material to behave as if it is a fluid. So that stage in which a soil behaves as if a liquid is called as liquid limit. Now just imagine that actually you are allowing it to dry. The same slurry that you have taken, you are allowing it to dry. You are allowing the moisture to get lost. You are drying it under hot sun. So after a particular stage, you will reach a consistency state of a material in which you are able to make different shapes out of it. I will just give you an example. I'm sure that actually you must have seen videos related to pottery. How, in the pottery, a person used to try to make pots out of clay. He will mix, you must have seen it is a completely the clay which is been used. So he will take a mass of clay, keep it on the top of a rotary wheel. He will rotate it, and with his hands, he used to carve it into different shapes. Now, the water content at which he does this activity is called as plastic stage, because at this particular water content, the clay which he has taken into account is behaving as if it is a liquid, as if it is a plastic material. So that is the reason why actually it is able to take up the shape which we are defining with the help of our hands. So the plastic stage of any soil is the stage at which it can retain its shape to which it is been made to. So this is called as the plastic stage. And again, say for example, if you are drying that particular soil, what will happen is the water will again come down, and we come at a situation in which it will be behaving as if it is a very stiff mass of soil or a dry pad or a solid material in which it has, though its complete pores are filled with water, thereafter the material is unable to undergo any other volumetric deformation. So that particular limit is called as shrinkage limit, which means shrinkage limit is that limit at which the particles cannot shrink more. The water vapor will be lost from the void space, whereas that complete volume of solid pad which has been made cannot undergo any more volumetric deformation out of it. So that particular limit is called as the shrinkage limit. So when we define each of this limit, the liquid limit is the limit at which a soil tend to behave as if it is a liquid. Now, plastic limit is the water content, is the minimum water content at which a soil can behave as if it is a plastic. Similarly, a shrinkage limit is the minimum water content at which a soil can behave as if it is a semi-solid. So you can see. So I mean, I will just give you an analogy. The way in which actually you make dosa out of batter. Whenever you are preparing dosa, you must have seen the batter has been prepared. So the batter is really speaking at its liquid limit. It is in a slurry stage. It can flow. The batter is behaving as if it is, a completely liquid state. So, and you are having a hot pan above which actually you are going to place your batter. So whenever you are having a hot pan, and the moment you keep the batter, what is happening is you are allowing the water to dry out of it. So the moment actually the batter has been poured, with the help of a tavi or whatever it is, actually you can make the shape of a flat or circular plate, or what do you call it? A thin film of dosa can be made out of it. So at that stage, actually you are playing with its plastic stage. Now again, when more and more water is been lost, it comes to the stage of semi-solid, and finally, when the actual dosa is ready, the complete moisture, almost majority of the moisture is been lost, and it will be in a solid state. So the same thing is happening to soil also. Another example which you can correlate is basically the field, the cricket field, or the paddy field in which people used to go for playing cricket. During rainy season, you can't even think of walking through it. The same soil, when there was more sufficient, when there was more water inside it, your legs used to get slipped inside it. Whereas when the rainy season, is over, after that actually the dry season commences. By the time actually the soil will start losing moisture inside it, and you can see that actually people in fact play cricket over the surface or football or whatever it is, which means the soil property, the behavior of a soil completely got altered from a liquid state to a plastic state to a semi-solid state to a solid state. So this is what exactly has happened. So I think most of you must have observed whenever cricket matches are happening and whenever rainfall happens, immediately what they do is they will come over to the pitch and they will cover the pitch portion, because actually the pitches are mostly constructed using clay. So the moment some sort of water enters into the clay, its behavior is going to change. So you cannot allow that to happen. That's one of the reasons why actually whenever rainfall happens, the people are taking utmost care in covering the actual 22-yard or the actual pitch in which the play is going on, because actually those layers are compacted clay. Now finally, the advantage of doing, as I have told you, the consistency limit is also required to name a fine-grained soil. The reason I will tell you, we have to get the liquid limit as well as the plastic limit. As I have told you in the coming classes, I will teach you in one of the sessions how exactly we can determine the liquid limit and plastic limit. Now, once you get the liquid limit and plastic limit, what you can do is there is something which is called as a plasticity chart. So this plasticity chart can be plotted based on the liquid limit as well as the plastic limit. On the y-axis that you see is plasticity index. Can somebody tell me what do you mean by plasticity index?
So liquid limit minus plastic limit.
Simple as that, very good. So the difference in liquid limit to plastic limit is called as the plasticity index. So when you are having the plasticity on the y-axis and on the x-axis, you have liquid limit. Now, when you want to classify as per the USCS classification, anything above 50, any soil which has a liquid limit which is greater than 50, it is either highly compressible clay or highly compressible silt or highly compressible organic matter. So any soil which is having a liquid limit which is greater than 50, it is called as highly compressible. Any soil which is having a liquid limit which is lesser than 50, it is low compressible clay. It can be low compressible organic matter, or it can be low compressible silt. So this is how actually you can broadly classify soil, either highly compressible or low compressible. Now, whereas in Indian standards, if you go and see, there is one more intermediate classification. So the way in which actually Indian classification happens is we have lesser than 35, which is low, 35 to 50, which is intermediate, and greater than 50, it is highly compressible. So we are having an intermediate range also as per the Indian standards. But it is better that actually you follow the USCS classification, Unified Soil Classification, which is much more simpler. So rather than avoid all those intermediate classifications. Now, there is something which is called as an A-line. So A-line is nothing other than there is an equation which is written for the A-line, which is 0.73 liquid limit minus 20. So depending upon the liquid limit of the soil, the A-line will keep on changing. So please remember that the A-line is not a constant line. A-line is a constant line for a particular soil. For different soil, the A-line will keep on changing because the term liquid limit is already inbuilt inside the A-line. Now, once you plot the A-line, the next thing is you have to check for its plasticity index. As somebody was clearly mentioning, it is liquid limit minus plastic limit, which will give you the plasticity index. So once you obtain the plasticity index and once you have plotted the A-line, depending upon where exactly the plasticity index comes, it can be either clay. Anything above A-line is clay. Anything below A-line is either silt or organic matter. So did you follow what I tried to convey? Hello? Am I audible to you? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Did you follow what I tried to convey?
Yes,
I'm sure. Yeah. So the simplest thing that you do is you will determine the soil's liquid limit and plastic limit. So once you have determined the liquid limit and plastic limit, you will plot the plasticity chart. So we got the plasticity chart by drawing the A-line 0.73 liquid limit minus 20. Now the next thing is, the first thing is we will check whether the plasticity index of that particular soil is lying above the A line or below the A line. If it is above, it is clay. If it is below, it is silt or organic matter. The next aspect is we will check whether its liquid limit is greater than 50 or less than 50. If the liquid limit of a soil is greater than 50, it is highly compressible. If it is lesser than 50, it is low compressible. So this is how actually you utilize a plasticity chart for naming a soil. So just to sum it up, whenever a soil is been given to you, the first aspect is to understand whether it is a coarse grain soil or a fine grain soil. In a coarse grain soil, you can classify them based on the sieve analysis that you conduct, whereas in a fine grain soil, you classify it based on the sieve analysis as well as the hydrometer analysis as well as the plasticity chart that we put in forward. So this is how actually one can name a soil. Now coming into the engineering property. Now this is the basic step that one has to do every time. Now we are interested in engineering property. Now the purpose with which we do an engineering test is always based on what application you are going to apply in the field. For example, if you are interested to construct a house, you will be more interested in getting its shear strength of that particular soil which is going to be below a foundation. Now say for example, if you are going to construct a new road, you will be more interested in getting the compaction character of the soil which is going to be filled in that particular location. Now another application I would say is if you are going to have the road construction above a clay deposit, above a field, above a clay paddy field, you will be more interested in getting the consolidation behavior. Now imagine actually you are going to construct an earthen dam. In that case, you will be more interested in measuring the permeability. So always the engineering property, you have to aim at determination of engineering property depending upon the end application. You need not have to determine all the engineering properties every time. You have to speak with your client, understand what is the requirement. Based on that, you have to take a call on what engineering behavior is to be measured. Did you get the point? Now, the other day actually I was just giving an introduction to 3 engineering property, which is basically the compressibility, shear strength and permeability. Today I will be just taking you, and I just want to brush up a few of your fundamentals regarding your understanding in all these aspects. So as I have told you, the compressibility is nothing other than the volumetric deformations which a soil undergoes when it is subjected to loading. Always remember, the compressibility is nothing other than the volumetric deformation that a soil mass will undergo when it is being loaded. Now, the compaction is basically when you are applying some sort of impact loading, whereas consolidation happens when you are applying some sort of static loading. In compaction, you are densifying the soil by applying some impact load, thereby getting rid of the air voids present inside them. So the first densification, the densification by compaction is by applying some sort of impact load, thereby the air voids are being expelled out of the soil mass. That is why actually you densify soil. Whereas in case of consolidation, normally this is a phenomenon that happens in clay. You will be densifying the soil by applying some static loading, thereby the excess pore water pressure will ooze out of the sample, thereby densifying it. So this is the fundamental difference between compaction and consolidation. Now coming into the light compaction test, forget about all these things. Actually, I will be explaining these things when the actual test comes. What we gain out of a compaction test? The primary aim of doing a compaction test is to understand the maximum dry density. So what do you mean by maximum dry density? So the maximum dry density, so the purpose with which we do a light compaction is that we need for each soil, there will be a particular water content at which the soil can be packed to its maximum density. So that particular density is called as MDD or maximum dry density. And the water content corresponding to maximum dry density is called as optimum moisture content. So is this part clear for everyone? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So the ultimate intention of doing a compaction test in lab is to determine the maximum dry density. meaning that to what density we can compact a particular soil. Now, at the same time, we also need to estimate at what water content we can achieve the maximum dry density. Now, as you see over here, now while doing this test, we will keep on adding a bit of water. Initially, we have added somewhere close to 7 or 8%. We got a dry density value. Again, we incremented the water content. We can see that the density is keeping on increasing, and after reaching a maximum value, it is decreasing. So this is how actually this is called as a compaction curve. This is how a compaction curve looks for any of the soil. But the only thing is that actually this curve will shift to the left or the right depending upon the soil characteristics. Now the next aspect is nothing other than the consolidation, as I have told you. So the consolidation is also, as I have mentioned, it is a phenomena of densification of soil. As you see over here, there is a sample which has been kept. Now this sample, we are having a loading pattern on which, as I have told you, in consolidation, we are applying static load. There is no impact load. So initially what has happened is, initially there were soil particles as well as water which was filled. Now, as I have told you, in clay, just by applying some impact load, water won't escape out of it. It will just get slipped away. So we will be constantly applying a stress from the top by applying a constant load. We will have to keep it for 24 hours or 48 hours. Now what will happen is, with this static loading, the particles will start rearranging themselves. And what will happen is, the water will ooze out of the system. So thereby the densification happens. So this is how actually the phenomena happens in consolidation. We are forcing or ejecting the water out of the system by applying some sort of static loading. So there is a fundamental difference by which the densification process can be achieved in a coarse grain soil and fine grain soil. In coarse grain soil, you can sort to the activity which is called as compaction. Whereas in clay soil, if you want to get it densified, you have to make sure that you apply some static stress so that the water pressure will ooze out. Now let me ask you one thing. Now if you increment the stress, do you think again water will come out of it? So for example, initially I have applied 50 kPa. After 24 hours, again I have incremented the water pressure, the static pressure to 100 kPa. So whether more water will go out? So there are two outcomes. The reason why actually we do consolidation is to plot two different graphs. So this particular is nothing other than the displacement versus time, the graph which is been plotted. So this is called as coefficient of consolidation. There are two methods. It is called as root time graph, and the other method is called as log time graph. The same output that you obtain from a consolidation test, you can get the coefficient of consolidation, the rate of consolidation, by two different methods, which is log time and root time method. And finally, you can also get one more parameter which is called as the compression index. So which is also required for determining how much is the total settlement that can be estimated. So the reason why actually we measure all these parameters is to understand. So for example, in the field, if you are going to have a construction in clay, after how many years the total consolidation will be over? Meaning that after 3 years or 5 years, at what time the total consolidation will be over? Similarly, the other aspect is compression index. The compression index is being determined to check how much is the total settlement, because most of the isolated footings are designed for a maximum settlement of 50 mm. Now, if the settlement is more, what will happen is the building will keep on settling, and one fine morning we can see that the building will fail, because the additional moment 6EI delta by L square will be additionally generated inside the beams, and finally the building will collapse. So to take care of all these aspects, actually we have to take into account of the consolidation aspect also. Now coming back to the next aspect, which is shear strength. Now in shear strength, as I have told you, we are very eager in determining the shear strength parameters in geotechnical engineering. So this is one of the major aspect, I would say. So this is for understanding whether my structure which is planned to be constructed at a particular location is going to be there without having any stability issues or safety issues. So there are many laboratory tests which are available for checking the soil. So I will just take you through a journey through a few of the tests that are important to us. So one is basically the direct shear test, in which this particular test is mostly adopted in case of coarse grain soil. So you can see the brown colored soil is inside this test setup. So the base will be kept at a constant location. It has been fixed at the base, whereas the top portion of this shear box is able to move. What we will do is we will apply shearing load, and we will make sure that the failure will happen at the interface of this box. Now, based on that, and there are different, as you see over here, we can apply different normal load. So for example, initially we are applying 50 kPa. We applied the normal load of 50 kPa, then we sheared it. Next time is again we will fill it with the same soil at the same density. Again we will increment the normal load to 100 kPa. Again we will do the shearing test. And at least 2 or 3 tests we will perform, and finally we will be plotting the normal stress to the shear stress. So this is a graph which we can obtain in a direct shear test. So from this we can obtain the shear parameters, cohesion and friction. So if you extrapolate this particular line, it will meet somewhere on the y-axis. So that intercept will give you nothing other than the cohesion, and the friction dy by dx will give you the theta, tan inverse dy by dx will give you the friction angle phi. So finally, as you can see over here, the phi is demarcated as 39, which means that when they try to extrapolate this graph, it is meeting at 0 at the origin. So when they took the dy by dx, tan inverse of dy by dx, they obtained the value of friction as 39 degree. So this is how actually the cohesion parameters, or the shear strength parameters. Whenever, always remember, we are doing all the shear strength test in order to obtain the shear strength parameters. So the shear strength parameters are nothing other than cohesion and friction. All the tests under shear strength is being performed to get C as well as phi. Now we have the UCS test, as you see. So this particular test is the mostly adopted in case of clay soil. As you see over here, a clay soil sample is kept and loading is being applied, and the strength is nothing other than the load per area. You can directly obtain the unconfined compressive strength. So this is one of the simplest tests that can be adopted on clay. But what is the limitation of this particular test? Can somebody tell me what is the limitation? Okay. So, and we are having the third test, which is nothing other than the triaxial test. So this is one of the mostly adopted tests for determining the shear strength parameters. So one of the most accurate method, because in the previous method, in unconfined compressive strength, there is no provision for applying confining stresses, which means the field condition was not simulated properly. In the field, there is confining effect. Whenever any construction is being made, we have the effect of confinement. The soil is supported by the adjacent soil. So that particular confinement effect is not taken into account when you are doing a UCS test. Whereas in case of a triaxial sample, as the name indicates, triaxial in all the axes. In a triaxial sample, we have the provision for applying confining pressures, simulating the field condition. Apart from that, actually we have the loading provision from the top. So this particular test is mostly analogous to what exactly is happening in the field, and the determination of C and phi, the cohesion or the shear strength parameters, are more efficiently done in this particular test. And this is most widely adopted test, but it is a very complicated test for performing in the laboratory. And finally, we have the vane shear test. So the vane shear test is also a test which is obtained or conducted for getting the shear strength parameters. There are two ways by which vane shear test is being conducted. Either it can be a field vane or it can be a lab vane. The first image that you see is basically a field vane shear test, in which a vane is nothing other than a blade that you see. So this cross blade is being lowered into the ground, whose strength has to be measured, and you will apply torque on the top. You will make the failure to happen, and based on the torque correlations with the shear strength, you can compute how much ever with the shear strength of that soil be. The same thing can be replicated in a laboratory scale, only thing is that actually you will minimize the scale of the blade that you use in the field to that of the lab, and the sample size is also limited, almost 38 mm by 75 mm. So you will lower the blade, and rest of the procedures that you see are one and the same. The equations which are used for getting the parameters are also the same, but the field weighing is mostly preferred because actually it is more realistic compared to the laboratory vein shear test that you perform. And the last test or the engineering property that has to be measured is basically the permeability. So there are two ways by which actually one can perform a permeability test. So there one method is called as a constant head. The first image that you see on the left hand side is basically that of a constant head method. So constant head means the H value that you see is maintained a constant. The water level difference between the head, the tank which is kept over here, the overflow and the outcome, whatever with the water outlet which is coming, we are maintaining head. So the difference in head between the top tank as well as the bottom tank is taken as H. So this particular test is called as a constant head. So this test is mostly adopted in case of coarse grain soil. In case of sandy soils, we adopt the constant head test. Whereas on the right hand side, what you see is basically a variable head test. In a variable head test, you can see a standpipe. In this standpipe, actually, you will fill it with water, and you will, after a particular time period of, say, for example, 5 seconds, you will measure the drop in height, delta H. So the drop in height can be measured, and based on that, you can estimate how much is the coefficient of permeability. So this type of test is mostly adopted in case of fine grained soil, in case of clay soil. So these are the two different type of tests which is adopted for measuring the permeability. So permeability of a soil is nothing other than the ability of any matrix to allow the passage of fluid flow through them. Okay, a material is highly permeable means it has higher ability for conveying fluid transmission through it. A highly porous system, a very highly porous system is always have a very high permeability. For example, sandy soil. If you take a sandy soil inside this, and if you pour water, you can see that water will come out of it immediately. That means that actually the permeability of the system is high. Whereas if you take a clay soil, you may have to wait for days and months in order to make sure that actually a drop of water from the top reaches the bottom. So these are the various tests that you are going to learn in this particular semester. The reason why actually I just wanted to give you an introduction is to make you realize why exactly all these tests are being performed. So this is basically a glimpse of, I know that actually you have already learned the theory of all these particular tests in the previous semester, all these tests in detail. So we'll be dealing with the experimental part, how exactly the experiments are being conducted in the lab for each of these parameter determination. Okay, so with this, actually the introduction for the course is over. I think for the last class and this class, I was trying to make you realize why the tests are being done on different type of soil for determining its index property or engineering property. So any doubts from your side?
No, sir.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.